So let's jump into responsive web flows. By now you have all of the tools that you need to start building a responsive layout. So you have that proportional thinking required to make the flexible grid. You know how to integrate fixed width media in your design, like images and videos, and you know how to use media queries and how they can allow you to have a site that works on many devices and multiple screen sizes. So now um, we want to start incorporating this into our development workflow. So you have to ask yourself, how are our sites really going to be used by our users? We have to think about the context that they're using it in addition to just the device that they're using it on. So it might be, are they using the site while they're walking with their phone, or are they on the subway? Are they inside? Are they outside? Are they in an area where cell service might not be super great? And these are all things that are going to affect our design decisions. And we have to ask ourselves, do the priorities of the user change when their context changes? So do they want to see something different when they're on their phone? Should the site even look the same on the phone as it does on desktop? So a few questions you need to ask yourself. Responsive web design is more than just making the website look good on all browsers. It means putting consideration into thinking about what the user might want to access while they're on a phone versus maybe when they're on their iPad or on their computers. So maybe on the desktop version, there are a bunch of images at the top of the page that look super cool on desktop, but if you view it on a phone, you might have to scroll for a while before getting to the actual content. So with that being said, on the other hand, it can be pretty difficult to know the actual exact state of the user. There's no way of knowing whether or what they're actually doing. So sometimes all we have to work with is knowing our audience, doing proper research, and figuring out what our users actually want. And then through media queries, we can target that device. An example of this is like, say you're making some kind of site or some kind of mobile application where it's like a running app or some kind of exercise app. The person probably isn't going to be sitting down on their couch when they're using it. So um, some concerns you might have there is how to make it usable when you're in that active state. So um, all right. In 2009, a guy named Luke Wroblewski challenged the web development community and said we shouldn't be treating mobile development as an afterthought, especially when there are just as many people now on their phones as there are browsing the web on their desktop. So he's credited with coming up with this mobile first design philosophy, which basically says that we should start product design from the mobile end, which has a lot more restrictions like bandwidth, data usage, and that kind of stuff, and then expand to tablet and then to desktop. So it's starting with a smaller set of features and adding to it as needed. And this can really help prevent extra bloat that we don't actually need. So it's really easy to add a ton of stuff as you're going, like social media icons and pop-ups and all of that on desktop, but when you view it on mobile, there's just not enough space for all of it. There's not enough screen real estate, as I call it. So the idea is that if you start designing for a phone and you realize that you don't really need all of this stuff, then do you really need it on desktop? So this can serve as a way to really nail down exactly what the important parts of your site are, because you have to have it working on mobile. I have this article here that I'm linking to. It's a pretty short article and it kind of explains what mobile first design really is and also goes over progressive enhancement and graceful degradation. So make sure you read that. So, how can we actually start thinking about this in our designs? One thing is to stop thinking about desktop as being the default. So when you're using media queries, even in the examples that we worked through last week, we treated the code that wasn't in a media query as the code that would apply to desktop. And then we added a bunch of media queries that were like max width, 800 pixels, and then it would switch to some mobile friendly version of the site. So this kind of switches that way of thinking and says the default styling, the code that applies to all width, is what we want on mobile, and the media queries are for larger and larger screens. So the point I'm trying to get across is that responsive web design is more than just being able to make something look nice on all browsers and devices, but it also comes down to what your user might want to do with it. So just keep in mind some constrictions that your user might have, like if they're in rural Pennsylvania, where I'm from, you aren't going to want to have a super high resolution photo heavy site because your user might not be able to load them on their slow connection, which means they might just give up on your site completely and just go somewhere else. So just a few things to keep in mind there. Let me know if you have any questions on that. Here I have this example. This used to be, I don't know if it's still in there, probably not anymore, but it was part of the Boston Globe website. This is taken from the book on responsive web design. So we have some styling here. This is the default. It applies to all pages. Uh, just setting a few basic styles here. Anything in here that you're adding, this is going to be applied to all screens, and the default would be mobile. So then you might have a number of media queries after this, like once it gets to 480 pixels, which is a little bit bigger, then apply some specific styles. Once it gets to 620, then apply some, and so on. So everything up here is going to apply to all screens, but make it look really good on mobile. And then as you need to add more stuff, more styling and more components, then you want to go up from there. A few questions for you to put in the week 14 channel. Why might we want to take a mobile first approach? What's the difference between these two? Why might you choose one or the other? And then, do you think the mobile first philosophy is more similar to progressive enhancement or graceful degradation, and why? So just think about those for a little bit and post your answers in the channel.